Teacher, okay, like the point you're talking about, you learned them in last time's lesson, the private Zoom, but then like the whole Zoom for the whole school, we didn't reach that point of the phylums, the phyla, sorry.
Where exactly did we stop, Najid? Maybe you missed
we stopped on we were looking at a flow chart. Then he told us to construct a dichotomous key.
A dichotomous key for the insects, eh?
Yes, for the insects.
For the insects. Oh. Okay. So Najinda is just reminding me that last time we had a very simple activity. We actually did study something new. We only went over an activity, an exercise. We tried an exercise. There was a dichotomous key and then a flow chart for selected arthropods. And then some people said, yeah, the lesson has just started, Melissa. Some people said they had completed Monera, had completed the Protoctista fungi. So they were going to the plants. And some people said for them had only looked at it, Monera. And I said, for this lesson, the screen is blurry. Mariam, if the screen is blurry, it's probably a network problem on your side. Okay, so I said to have everyone on board, we shall be starting with the fungi. So today we are going to talk about the fungi. The fungi. We said organisms are grouped into 5 kingdoms. That is where we stopped some time back. We said we have kingdom Monera, we have kingdom Protoctista, kingdom fungi, kingdom Plantae, and kingdom Animalia. Someone says it's my network. Okay, is that better? Is the board now better? Clearer? Okay, someone was complaining about the board. Let me hope now, if I write something, you're able to see it clearly. Ataho? No? Okay, now it should be better. It should be better. The network I have seems to be better now, eh? So I think you should be able. Otherwise, those that cannot see the work on the board clearly, at least I'm going to be spelling the words that you're not seeing. So if there's a word I've written on the board that is not clear, just let me know and I'll spell it for you, eh? Okay, yes, Marilyn. Marilyn? Okay, we are looking at kingdom fungi. I believe you've heard of many examples, many organisms that you normally call fungi. There are many examples. I'll give just a few, but I believe the examples I'm giving are common. You've heard of them. Amongst the organisms in this kingdom, we have organisms that we call the mushrooms. These ones are eaten. I believe we've all eaten them. Mushrooms, yes, good. I can see they are mushrooms. We have organisms that we call the toadstools. Toadstools. So mushrooms and toadstools are very common examples of the fungi. They are not the only ones, but these are the commonest examples of the bread mold, okay? Bukenya says we also have the bread mold. The bread mold is there. Penicillium is also there. Okay, penicillium, not penicillin, but penicillium. Good. Someone is also giving us yeast. Yeast is also another example of the puffballs are also there. Good. So all those are common examples of the fungi. All the organisms that someone is also giving moss. The person that is giving moss, that one is not okay. The person that gave moss, that one is not okay. Mosses are not fungi. The bracket fungi, that is okay. Bracket fungi, mushrooms, toadstools, yeast, puffballs, the bread mold, those ones are correct examples. Someone is also giving horsetails. Horsetails is not okay. Horsetails, mosses, those ones are not okay. Liverworts, those ones are not okay. Liverworts, rusts is okay, but liverworts, aspergillus is okay, but moss, horsetails, liverworts, those ones are not correct. I hope you're getting me right. Someone is also saying rhizoids. Rhizoids is also wrong. Rhizoids are root-like structures that are possessed by the bryophytes. We shall also be seeing them on these organisms here, but those ones are not okay. So the common examples are those ones. Now, when you look at the several examples you've given, someone is saying fans. Fans is not correct. Fans, mosses, liverworts, horsetails, those ones are not. I hope that note is very clear. They are not, teacher, and penicillium. Penicillium is okay. Okay. Now, when you look at the several examples you've given, they have some features in common, some characteristics in common. And maybe before we look at those characteristics of the fungi, the branch of biology that deals with study of fungi is what we call mycology. You must have seen this under the branches. Mycology. Mycology is a branch of biology that deals with study of fungi. Okay, fungi is actually, this is a big group of organisms. There are very many organisms in here, and these organisms are common almost everywhere, and they are usually found in big numbers. As we look at the characteristics, we shall actually see why the fungi are common, and they are found almost everywhere, and they are in large numbers. We shall see the reasons why. Now we are looking at the characteristics of the fungi. When you look at the organisms in this kingdom, all the organisms are unable to manufacture their own food. They are just like the animals. And therefore we can say the organisms in this kingdom are heterotrophic. The organisms are heterotrophic. That is, they feed on already manufactured food. Why do they feed on already manufactured food? They feed on already manufactured food because they do not have chloroplasts. They do not have chloroplasts, so they cannot make their own food. That means they have to obtain food from other organisms. So they feed on already manufactured food. Let me first have Amal Bushra. Yes, Bushra. Okay. Bushra doesn't have. Okay, yes.
Do all fungi feed on already manufactured food?
Do all fungi feed on already manufactured food? Someone is asking, do all fungi feed on already manufactured food? The answer is yes. All fungi feed on already manufactured food. There isn't a single fungus that is able to make its own food. All fungi are heterotrophic. Now, this kingdom here now becomes distinct. It becomes different from the previous two kingdoms we looked at. Kingdom Monera, the bacteria, some of them feed on already manufactured food. We went to Kingdom Protoctista. Again, we saw protozoa and algae. So again, some of the protists are able to make food. Some of them are unable. Now, for this kingdom here, as far as the nutrition is concerned, all organisms have a similar mode of feeding. They all feed on already manufactured food. So we are saying they are all heterotrophic. Now, whereas all these organisms feed on already manufactured food, they are heterotrophic. The exact feeding mechanism may vary from one fungus to another. Some fungi obtain food from other organisms. The other organisms are called the hosts. If you have a fungus and it is obtaining food from another organism, the other organism that actually provides food is called the host. Now, some fungi actually negatively affect the organisms from which they obtain food. Such organisms are said to be, or such fungi would be termed as parasitic fungi. So some fungi are parasitic. They are parasites. Some fungi are parasitic. Some fungi are parasitic. In other words, they obtain food from other living organisms and they cause harm. They inflict some harm onto those organisms that are actually providing food. Okay, teacher, you mean parasites? Yes, some fungi are parasites. They obtain food from other organisms. The other organisms, we are calling them the hosts, and those hosts somehow are harmed. For example, there are fungi that get into contact with our skin, our body, and we end up getting some diseases. I believe you've heard of things like fungal infections, fungal diseases. I believe you've heard of them. I believe you may have heard of something called athlete's foot. Yeah? Athlete's foot. You may have heard of that one that causes that bad smell. Athlete's foot. Someone is talking of the ringworm. Good. So those fungi are actually onto your skin. They are getting nourishment from your skin, from your body, and somehow they're causing some negative effect onto you. So they are said to be parasitic. But I also believe you've seen some things that grow on the backs of trees, B-A-R-C-K, backs of trees, backs of trees. You've seen some grayish things. I'm not talking about the green ones, but you've seen some gray, scale-like things that grow on the trees. If you've seen those ones, that is actually an association between two different organisms. One of them is a fungus and the other is an alga. That association, that thing that looks like a patch on the back of the tree, usually gray in color, is what we call the lichen. is what we call the lichen. A lichen is an association between two organisms, but then one of them is a fungus. In that association, that is the lichen, the two organisms, the alga and the fungus, both benefit. Both benefit. Such an association where both organisms benefit is what we call a mutualistic association. A mutualistic association. So some fungi are mutualistic, some fungi parasitic, some fungi mutualistic. We also have fungi that that feed on dead decaying organic matter. I believe the term for that is not new for most of us. Some fungi feed on dead decaying organic matter. An organism that feeds on dead decaying organic matter, we say that organism is saprophytic. Saprophytic. So whether the fungus is parasitic, mutualistic, or saprophytic, we are saying the fungus is unable to make its own food. It is obtaining food from already food that is already made, or it is obtaining food from other living organisms. So we are saying all fungi are heterotrophic. Okay, then another characteristic of the fungi is fungi have cell walls. All fungi have cell walls. They are made up of cells that have cell walls. Now, when we're looking at the plants, I hope we remember, we said plants are made up of cells that have a cell wall. But we said the cell wall in the fungi is made up of a certain carbohydrate. We gave the name of that carbohydrate. Do we all remember which carbohydrate makes up the cell wall in plant cells? Yes, Jeremiah. Which carbohydrate makes up the cell wall in plant cells? There's a certain carbohydrate, a complex carbohydrate. Okay, glycogen, someone says glycogen. No, it's not glycogen. The cell wall, wonderful. Ashley says it is cellulose. Plant cells have a cell wall, and the cell wall of the plant cells is made up of a carbohydrate called cellulose. I wouldn't write it here because some people will take it that I'm saying it is making up this cell wall. So I'm not going to write cellulose here, but we are saying plant cells are made up of, plant cells have a cell wall made up of cellulose. Now here we are meeting the cell wall again. We are saying the fungi are made up of cells that have a cell wall. The cell wall in the fungi isn't made up of cellulose. It is made up of another substance. It's actually a carbohydrate as well. Another substance that we call chitin. So this one here is made up of a carbohydrate called chitin. This term here, this carbohydrate here, we shall also be meeting it later on as we look at the animals. But I want to say something right away. Probably some people will be able to remember then when we get to kingdom Animalia. Insects, I believe you can already think of many examples. Insects have an exoskeleton, not a cell wall, but they have an exoskeleton. The exoskeleton of the insects is made up of the same substance, chitin. So the fungi have a chitinous cell wall, or they have a cell wall made up of chitin. Yes, Navide. Navide, your hand is up. Are you saying something? Nabilie? Okay, I think Nadia just forgot to lower the hands. Yes, Karunji Shiba? Karunji has nothing. Yes, Zara. Tiana. Zara. Okay. Yes, Marilyn.
I was talking about shooting. It is,
Okay.
I remember when we talked about it, we said it's waterproof. It's many plants have it to prevent excessive evaporation. They like, it's kind of, it protects them from direct sunlight. It keeps them usually rehydrated and all that. Remember, we talked about it, and an example with a plant that has chitin is a mango plant. You will find that waxy substance. That's the one she's talking about.
Okay, some correction there. That is very good, Marilyn, but there's some mix-up, Marilyn. I hope you can get me. You're now confusing this one for this one. The plants don't have this one. The plants have this one. The one that makes up the cuticle. Yeah? Marilyn, can you hear me? Marilyn. Okay. I hope you heard. Marilyn, you're confusing this with this. The plants don't have this. For them, they have this. The one that is waterproof and reduces transpiration, evaporation of water from the plants. It is this one. Here we are talking this one. Those are two different things. Okay. Marilyn says Shazad. Good. So to avoid confusion, let me remove this. We are saying fungi have cells with cell walls, and those cell walls are made up of chitin, and the same substance makes up the exoskeleton of the insects. I hope that is clear. Okay, we go to another characteristic. Those are so far two. We talked about heterotrophic, two cellular cell walls. Another characteristic of the fungi is the bodies of the fungi. Most of the fungi are multicellular. Let me first talk about that one. Most fungi are multicellular. And I believe everyone still remembers. Multicellular simply means the body is made up of many cells. So most fungi are multicellular. But we can also give some examples that are unique. That is why I'm saying most. I've not said all of them. Okay, another characteristic that I can actually get from Navidia, she says they store carbohydrate in form of glycogen. That is correct. These ones store glycogen. Glycogen is a complex carbohydrate. And if you remember, we looked at differences between plants and animals. Back then, we saw it is the animals that store glycogen, the plants store starch. Do we remember that one? Here we are saying the fungi are just like the animals. They also store carbohydrate in form of glycogen. Another characteristic, yes, as shared by Chimtai, she says, their bodies are made up of thread-like structures called hyphae. That is very correct. Bodies made up of hyphae. Made up of thread-like hyphae. Their bodies are made up of thread-like hyphae, thread-like structures that we call the hyphae. And we also say the body of a fungus, that is the numerous hyphae. If it is one, we call it a hyphae. If there are many, don't say hyphas, just add an E and it becomes hyphae. We are saying a group of hyphae, the body of a fungus is called a mycelium. We call it a mycelium. M-Y-C-E-L-I-U-M. Mycelium. Naturally says they lack chlorophyll, though majority are plant-like. That is fine. That is why we say they are heterotrophic. And then someone says they are eukaryotic. Wonderful. Another characteristic, someone says they are eukaryotic. 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 That means they have cells that have a distinct nucleus. The cells have a distinct nucleus. That is a nucleus that is enclosed by a nuclear membrane. Their genetic material is enclosed by a nuclear membrane. So those are some of the characteristics of the fungi. Those are some of the characteristics of the fungi that we can look at. Someone says they are saprophytic. Namagembe. True, some fungi are saprophytic, but not all fungi. So the characteristic is they are heterotrophic. Heterotrophic can now be broken down. Someone says, can you explain the point of hyphae some more? I think I'll talk about the hyphae as I draw here the structure of a fungus. We are going to look at the structure of a fungus, just one of them. We've seen many examples, but we are going to draw a diagram to show structure of just one fungus. And that structure is going to be, the organism is going to be the bread mold. The bread mold. I believe we've all ever had bread going bad. If you get your bread, keep it for a long time, especially in a damp place. Over time, you'll wake up one morning and you'll find some gray things growing on the bread. Fungi are non-vesicular. Okay, someone says fungi are non-vesicular. That is okay. They don't have conductive tissues. They are non-vesicular. They do not have conductive tissues. But we may not expect them to have the vesicular tissues, because the person that says they do not have vesicular tissues is probably connecting these to the plants. You know, the fungi are a bit plant-like, as in they have cell walls, so they are a bit plant-like, a bit plant-like. But she says they are vesicular. Is it okay to say they are decomposers? Not all fungi may be decomposers. It is those that we said are saprophytic that we can comfortably say are decomposers. But it is true, fungi, some fungi are decomposers. They are actually important in the recycling of organic matter. But we shall look at that under economic importance. Do you mind explaining the point of glycogen again? We said these organisms store glycogen, and I said glycogen is simply a complex carbohydrate. Cells tend to store food within them. As an example, we said plant cells store starch. And if you remember the structure of a plant cell, inside the plant cell, you drew some small things and you labeled them as starch granules. Inside an animal cell, you drew the same tiny structures and you labeled them glycogen granules. I also believe you also know that you store food inside you. Have you ever thought about that one? Have you heard of that one? That we store food inside us? Where exactly do we store the food? Where do we store food? We store food for future use, of course. Teacher Google says the fungi are both unicellular. Yes, Namagembe. I actually said, if you look at the word written, I've said mostly. But it is true, some are unicellular and some are multicellular. Okay, so we store food. The simple example that probably brings out the storage of food would be fat. You have fat under the skin. I believe you've heard of that one. We have fat deposits under the skin. We have subcutaneous fat. Okay, so we store food. We are saying these organisms also store, but for them they store the carbohydrate in form of glycogen. So glycogen is just a complex carbohydrate, just that, complex carbohydrate. So glycogen is the food storage form in fungi and in the animal cells as well. Okay. Yes, Bushra, your hand is up. Are you saying something, Amal? Or did you just forget to lower? Yes, Amal. Amal. And then someone has also shared these organisms are non-motile. That means they do not move from one place to another. Fungi do not move. They are non-motile. Motile is M-O-T-I-L-E. Non-motile. Okay. Amal, if you have nothing to say, you could do, you lower your hand. You're confusing us. Okay, I've said we are now going to look at the structure of one fungus. We've given very many, and I was talking about the bread. If you keep your bread for a long time, you'll suddenly see certain things growing on the bread, and they soon change color. They are brownish, somewhere there. I believe you've seen those things growing on the bread. Those things that you saw growing on the bread are what we call the bread mold. That is what we call the bread mold. The bread mold has a name, scientific name. That could probably be the common name, but it has a scientific name. Yes, Marilyn. Okay. The scientific name of this organism that we are looking at is, Barige says it is Rhizopus stolonifer. Good. It is Rhizopus stolonifer. You remember writing scientific names? Then first, the name of the genus starts with a capital letter. The name of the species starts with a small letter. We underline the two separately. Okay. And then someone is also telling us, only for bread. Someone is telling us that something has shared. Someone has shared something in the chat that I wanted to read. Teacher, is it fungi? Do fungi reproduce by means of spores? Yes, fungi reproduce by means of spores. However, fungi show variable methods of reproduction. Sometimes reproducing sexually, other times reproducing asexually. And even when it comes to the asexual reproduction, some organisms reproduce by budding, for example, yeast. Some of them reproduce by spore formation, that is asexual. We shall look at it. And then they can also reproduce sexually by conjugation. But reproduction by means of spores is actually a common one. Reproduction by means of spores is a common one. Stolonifer is Stolonifer. Okay, so I'm going to draw here very simple, simplified drawing. So when you find these things on your bread, you'll actually find a mass, very many of them. So what I'm drawing here is just a sample, just a small part of those things that you're finding on your bread. So that is the simplified drawing of the bread mold, the Rhizoids stolonifer. Let us now look at the names of some of these parts. We have already been told that these organisms reproduce by means of spores. We can detailed drawing of the fungi. You can find a detailed drawing of the fungi in any textbook. Biology textbook of biology, you'll find. You can also go on Google, put there, and you'll be able to see. Okay, if you're unable to see the board clearly, it could be, teacher, you're blocking. Yes, I'm blocking because I have to write something. Teacher, can I name? Okay, someone is assisting me to name these parts. Good. So let me first put the label lines, and then she'll give us the names. So we have that, 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 we have that. For simplicity, let me put this so that the person helping me to label can comfortably choose a part to label. Okay, yes, okay, I have many hands. I'll start with Abe. Yes, Abe?
It was Marilyn, but let me start with I.
Yes.
I is Sporangiophore.
I is Sporangium.
Yes.
These are Roman numerals. These are Roman
Yes.
numerals. 1, 2, 3. So which one are you naming?
I.
This one here.
Yes.
It's 1. Yeah. You're saying it is that?
Sporangiophore.
Sporangium. No. Tried, but that one is not a Sporangium. Tried. Yes,
Isn't it part 2?
The Sporangium is part 2.
Yes. Roman 2.
Sporangium. Okay. Nachitende, which part are you choosing? Okay, Nachitende is not ready. Yes, Ashley says Roman 1 is the Sporangium, and she's right. 1 is the Sporangium. I hope the letters are big enough for you to read from where you are. Okay. Okay, Ambeja is not responding. Let us have Kalema. Yes, Kalema. Ambeja.
VI is the stolon.
ZI, VI,
common.
that's 6. Yeah, 6 is good. 6 is the okay.
IV is the spores.
IV, that is Roman 4. Okay, these are spores. Good. Ashley Nansley says 3 is the 3 is the rhizoids, and she's correct. This is the rhizoids. We are left with just one. That is part.
It is aerial hypha.
Aerial
Hypha.
hypha, correct. Aerial.
So is it the only hierarchy for all of them?
All these above the braid. Okay. So we have said amongst the characteristics that these organisms have bodies made up of thread-like structures. So here, when you look at this one, you're able to see the thread-like structures. This one here is one of them. That is another. This is another. Those. So each of these is called the hive. Now, this is the bread mold. It is found growing on the bread. Because it is found growing on the bread, some hyphae are found on the surface of the bread. Those are the ones you'll be able to see. Those are the ones you'll be able to see, the ones that are on the surface of the bread. But there are also those that are inside the bread or grow into the bread. So the hyphae are of two types. We have those that are aerial, and those that are rooting, R-O-O-T-I-N-G. Two types of hyphae, rooting hyphae, and then the aerial hyphae. So all these would be found above the bread. So they are actually aerial hyphae. All these are above the bread, so they are aerial hyphae. The ones that grow into the bread, these ones here, you can see them growing downwards. They're like roots. The ones that grow into the bread are the ones we are calling the rhizoids. This is an O. They are the ones that we are calling the rhizoids. So they're just like the roots linking. Okay? Akampura says there's something called a linking hypha. That is good. The linking hypha is the stolon. The stolon can also be called the linking hypha. Why linking? You see, it is connecting this mass to that mass. So we are calling it the linking hypha. Yes?
Is the linking hypha also part of the type? Is it part of the types of hyphae?
The linking hypha is part of the aerial hyphae because it is above the braid. Okay, it is not a type. Okay, I can see some hands up. Let me have Nagadia Najwa. Nagadia, what are you saying? You can unmute.
Teacher, you have unmuted me, but then I was asking.
Teacher, my answer was taken from Roman number 3. I just forgot my hand up.
Okay. Yes,
Teacher, I was asking. Yes. Does the bread mold always move in pairs? Like, does it always have the stolon with it?
Oh, this spread mold, they are not always pairs. For me, I've only chosen to draw just a small part because I wanted you to see all the components that it has. Otherwise, you'll actually find a mass, very many of these things here. So you'll find very many stolons, very many, not only,
Yes.
you won't only find these two masses. For simplicity, we only choose to draw those two because we want to show that different
Okay, thank you,
hyphae.
teacher.
Yes. Okay. The aerial hyphae, I said, all these thread-like structures are called hyphae. But then we put them into two categories. Those that grow downwards into the bread and then those that are on the surface of the bread. Those ones growing into the bread, we've called them the rhizoids. So the rhizoids can also be called rooting hyphae. Someone has shared that. Rooting, R-O-O-T-I-N-G, rooting hyphae, because they are like the roots. So we can call them the rooting hyphae. The rooting hyphae or the rhizoids are very important as far as feeding is concerned. Remember, we've said this thing grows on bread. It is actually saprophytic because the bread is dead. The organic matter of the bread is dead. So this bread mold is feeding on dead organic matter. So we can say it is saprophytic. But then how does it feed on the bread? How it feeds is this way. When it develops onto the bread, it sends out rhizoids into the bread. Once those rhizoids grow into the bread, they release digestive substances, enzymes. Those enzymes digest the bread, and then the products of digestion are absorbed into the rhizoids. That is how these organisms feed. I've said the rooting hyphae grow into the bread. They release digestive substances into the bread. Those digestive substances, enzymes, they digest the bread. Then the products of digestion are the ones that are taken into the rhizoids. So the rhizoids are for feeding. They may play some role of anchoring, but it may not be the major role. The major role is just feeding.
What do they release?
Enzymes. They release enzymes. Okay, I can see Akidi has a hand up before I continue. Yes, Akidi.
Teacher, how do they get to the bread? Because they're even in a polythene bag.
Oh, how do they get to the bread? Because the bread is maybe inside the polythene bag. How do they find their way onto the bread before the lesson ends? Okay, how do they find their way onto the bread? Now, how they find their way onto the bread, which is sealed in a polythene bag, is this way. Well, it's a bit, okay, it should have come at the end, but let me talk about it. These organisms here reproduce asexually by means of spores. They are here. Spores are tiny, airborne, tiny, light, airborne bodies. Those spores can actually find their way almost everywhere. They are moved by air, and you know air gets almost everywhere. Air is able to reach almost everywhere. So the molds are able to find bread as spores that are carried by the air. And you know spores are very small. You have them in the air and you can't even see them. So they are very small. They are there, they are in the air, they are carried by the air, but you cannot see them. That is how they get onto the bread. That is how they get onto your bodies. Haven't you heard of people that are allergic to certain things like pollen, spores too? You may have heard of people that have such allergies, but you can never see these things. Those things are very small. They are carried by the air. So that is how the spores, that is how the molds find the bread sealed in the cavera. Okay, Yes, alpha. I'm obstructing. Okay. Alpha, is it alpha? Ataho. Yes, Ataho.
Teacher, I'm sorry for taking you back, but my network was bad. Could you tell me the function of the rhizoids in fungi?
Rhizoids for feeding. We can just simplify and say for feeding or for absorbing digested food, something like that. Okay, yes, Bukenya Alia.
Teacher, I have a question about the yeast thingy. I know we haven't yet reached there and we are specifically looking at, but like, let's say they're to ask you for a diagram of yeast. Does yeast have any specific way in which it looks? Because is okay, like, is yeast a cell? Like, to simplify, is yeast a cell?
Okay, yes, yeast is a single cell. Yeast is a single cell. Yeast is actually one of the examples of the unicellular fungi. Amongst the characteristics, we said they are mostly multicellular. But then actually someone shared and said, when she Googled, she discovered they were saying some are unicellular and some are multicellular, which is very true. So yeast is an example of the unicellular fungi. Yeast is an example of the unicellular.
Okay.
Yes. But you can actually get a drawing from any common textbooks that we have, if you have one, or if you go to Google, put there yeast, you'll actually find that cell and you'll have the structures inside that yeast cell. That will actually be an assignment. Someone is saying, could I leave an assignment before the end of the lesson? I'm actually leaving that as the assignment. We haven't yet ended, but I may forget to mention it at the end. Just in case I do forget, I'm saying right now, look up the drawing of the yeast cell. Here we are lucky we are getting the rhizopus, but look up drawing showing structure of the yeast cell, and then you draw it. Make sure it is labeled, labeled. Make sure you label all the parts. Good. Okay, someone is asking, what is the function of the stolon? We are getting there, probably before the end of the lesson. Okay, I've already talked about the rhizoids, and I've said they are for feeding. They grow into the bread, release enzymes, the enzymes digest the bread, and then the products are absorbed. Just like what happens in your body. You put complex food into your body, your digestive system releases enzymes, they break down that food, producing simple soluble molecules. And then those simple soluble molecules are taken into the blood. Now here we don't have blood, we don't have a complicated system, but the organism also has a way of digesting its food using the rhizoids. Good. Then let me also talk about the spores. Spores, I've already said, reproductive bodies, very small and very light. They are carried by the air, carried by the wind from this organism here, and then carried almost everywhere. That is why I said fungi are very common in many places. You know, they are reproducing by means of spores, and the spores are dispersed by wind. That means they can be found anywhere. But teacher, if the cavera containing is not opened for a week, well, I've seen the cavera containing the bread. I think it's the one you also see. Have you ever noticed that there are some holes that are punched through? Yeah? For vapor, to get out. You may have noticed that one. Those holes punched in the cavera are too big for the pores to go through. You know that air can easily enter, so that air entering will actually contain the spores. Two, after the baking, usually the bread is kept somewhere so that it cools. It's not put in the cavera when it is hot. So during that time when it's left there to cool, the chances that the spores could come in. The spores could come in, land onto the bread. Those are the ways the spores find their way onto the bread. Okay. Thank you. Okay, then we have the spores. Okay, a question here. Yes.
Are there ways of preventing spores getting onto the bread?
Are there ways of preventing the spores getting onto the bread? Someone is asking, are there ways of preventing the spores getting onto the bread? Definitely there are ways of preventing the spores getting into contact with the bread. If after baking you ensure that this bread doesn't get into contact with air that may be contaminated, then yes, you'll be preventing spores from. But then another way of stopping probably the spores germinating, because what happens when you see these things growing onto the bread, the process is the spores somehow landed onto the bread, the conditions became suitable so the spores germinated to grow and develop into this. If you're able to stop the spores from germinating, then you'll actually be able to keep your bread and you won't be seeing those things, at least for some good time. Usually if you kept bread, I think in the fridge, say, cold conditions, you may not get that, isn't it? Okay. Okay, I can see some hands. Let me first finish this. We have said these organisms reproduce by means of spores. The spores are produced and stored in a case. That case is called the sporangium. So the sporangium can also be called a spore case. Someone is actually putting it in the chat there. The sporangium can also be called a spore case. So the sporangium that we see here contains spores. So as this organism here produces spores, you see the sporangium growing bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger. So a sporangium is a spore case. It simply contains the spores. Now, once the sporangium dries, it now breaks. When that sporangium breaks, it now releases the spores. But because we said the spores are small and very light, once the sporangium breaks or splits and the spores become exposed to the wind, then the wind will now blow those spores in all directions. In all directions. And the sporangium contains very many spores. Probably one reason why the sporangium contains very many spores is there's a lot of wastage. You know, these spores are simply blown by the wind, and the wind blows them anywhere, everywhere. And therefore, many of the spores don't actually get to land on suitable ground. You'll have many of them landing onto the soil, where they will not be able to germinate. You'll find many of them landing onto the roof, where the conditions are not suitable, so those ones won't germinate. You'll find many of them landing on, say, the tables and the tarmac, and many of those places that you can think of about that do not provide the suitable conditions. So to increase chances of at least a few of them landing onto suitable ground, this organism produces very many spores. And so we are saying the sporangium is actually a large case which contains the spores. The sporangium is supported by a hypha, of course an aerial hypha, a hypha, but that hypha has a name. And the name of that hypha is the sporangiophore or sporangiophore. Because of time, I'm simply going to stop on the names of these parts here. The good thing is we've talked about most of them. Sporangium contains spores. Spores are reproductive bodies. Sporangium contains the spores. It's a spore case. Sporangiophore supports the sporangium. Then we have the rhizoids for absorbing nutrition, absorbing food. And then, of course, the stolon, someone said it's a linking hypha, so it links. Then who produces? Oh, someone has a very good question. I've said the sporangium stores. It has spores, so I've said it stores. And now she's wondering, If the sporangium simply stores, then who produces? It is the one that produces as well. So the sporangium both produces and then stores. The sporangiophore supports the sporangium. The stolon links mycelia. It links mycelia. Okay, I think we are stopping there for today. There's quite a lot that we haven't gone into. Next time, we shall continue with our discussion on the fungi. We shall look at economic, or someone is talking about is budding like binary fission. Budding is not exactly binary fission. The two are slightly different, but it is closely related to, almost similar. The assignment Babidi have left is drawing. You look for a drawing of the yeast cell. Drawing of the yeast cell, and you draw. Make sure your drawing is very neat and it is labeled. Very neat, big enough, labeled. Okay, we are stopping here for today. We shall continue with our discussion of the fungi. Probably another part of the assignment, look up economic importance of fungi. Economic importance of fungi. You can actually get around 10 points. Economic importance. And as you look for the economic importance, don't only look at the ways the fungi are useful, you also look at the ways the fungi could be harmful. How could they be harmful? How could they be a nuisance? You write those ones, both positives and negatives, useful, harmful. You look at them. So those are two parts of the assignment: drawing the yeast cell and then economic importance. We shall continue from there next time. Sporangium, it's asexual, produces haploid spores. Is it okay? I searched the Google, they said about a sporangium, it's an asexual structure that produces haploid spores. Is it okay? Okay, Nagadia, that is okay. That is okay, but they're using a word there, haploid. Haploid. For now, we may not use that word, but at least I've seen they said it is an asexual structure and it produces spores. Is it okay? Yes, it's okay. The word haploid for now may be, we may not understand. So we could possibly leave it. I can see some hands still up. It's time. It's time. Okay, let me just allow these two people to say something. Marion and Nachimera, very fast. Marion first. Yes, Marion?
Excuse me, teacher.
Yes.
Teacher, I wanted to ask, is it only amoeba that gets food by engulfing?
Is it only amoeba that gets food by engulfing?
Yes.
No, no. It's not only amoeba that gets food by engulfing. Engulfing is also another process by which some of our white blood cells destroy the disease-causing organisms. So it's not the only one. Yes, Nachimera. That was Marion. Yes, Nachimera.
I just wanted a clarification between prokaryotes and eukaryotes.
Prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Okay. If you look at a bacterial cell, you won't see anything labeled as nucleus. Yet if you look at an amoeba, you'll see a part that is labeled as the nucleus. So an organism that doesn't have a nucleus, that organism is prokaryotic. It has genetic material, but the genetic material is not enclosed by a nuclear membrane. Then any organism that has a part and the part is labeled as nucleus, then that one is eukaryotic. In other words, it has genetic material enclosed by a nuclear membrane. Okay, we are stopping there. Don't forget the assignment and don't forget to keep safe. Follow the SOPs, wear the mask, and don't leave the home unless it's absolutely necessary. Have a good rest of the day.